Good morning and welcome to State of the Nation. This is our final episode on the series Beyond Constitutional Amendment 2 Act, and today the discussion is on youth experiences in the lawmaking process. I am your host, Monashe Mukahlera, and this broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper Television Network and our partners, Youth Empowerment and Transformation Trust, YET. We would also want to hear from you as usual, so please do share your views and comments on the show with us by visiting our Facebook page, ZimPapers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle at ZTN News. Now, the Youth Empowerment and Transformation Trust is a youth networking organization committed to the full participation of young people in sustainable development through advocacy and capacity building of youth and youth organizations in Zimbabwe. The Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Act 2 came into effect this year after successfully sailing through both the National Assembly and Senate. It was signed into law by the President and published as an act. It is now read as the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Number 2 Act 2021, Act Number 2 of 2021. So the Constitution Amendment 2 Act of 2021 has extended the addition of extra women members of Parliament by 2 more terms and also reserves 10 proportional seats in the National Assembly for the youth. And according to the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Number 2 Act 2013, Section 20, the youths are defined as people between the ages of 15 to 35 years. So today's discussion will be on youth participation in lawmaking processes involving young people from the rural and peri-urban youth. It will focus on youth experiences with the lawmaking process. So to help us unpack this topic, I'm joined by guests in studio as well as via Zoom. That is the first one, we have Dr. Hilary Msarurwa, Youth Development Expert. We have Margaret Chogugudza, Director for Rural Young Women Support Network from MASH East, and we have Linda Mpofu, a Programs Officer at Community Youth Development Trust from Gwanda, and Skanyisiwe Sebata, the Programs Manager for Rise and Shine Trust in Victoria Falls. Now, Dr. Hilary Msarurwa and Margaret Chogugudza are joining us in the studio, while Linda Mpofu and Skanyisiwe are participating virtually. So to kickstart our program today, I think we just want to understand what the experience of young people in these areas has been in relation to lawmaking. Let's start with you, Margaret. What has been the experiences of young people in lawmaking in your area?
Okay, thank you very much, Monashe. So, as a young person who's coming from a rural community from Mashonaland East Province, so what usually happens is when there are public hearings concerning, the lawmaking processes, they usually took place at a central position, like at a provincial city in the whole province. So, for example, in Mashonaland East, what usually happens is, for example, the public hearing on the Constitutional Amendment Bill Number 2, it took place in Marondera. So, as a young person who's coming from a district, Chikomba district, I need something like $20 for me to travel from Chikomba to Marondera to attend the public hearing. And also considering the fact, the time factor, the time that I have to arrive in Marondera, the time that I also have to come back home. So usually young people, they don't really attend the public hearings because, we do not have the resources for us to travel, those long distances, and also considering the time factor. And especially for the public hearings that has to do with the Constitutional Amendment Bill Number 2, they took place during the COVID-19 era, and with all the lockdown measures that were in place, the travel restrictions. So for me to travel from Chikomba to Marondera, I needed a letter. And, I couldn't get a letter, so there's no way that I could travel, because of the travel restrictions. So these are some of the experience that we always face time and time again. We don't have the resources to travel for the public hearings, and for this one also the issues of lockdown, the issues of travel restrictions, the issues of information as well. Like most young people, they don't even know like what exactly is happening. They are not aware of the public hearings. They are not aware of what's going on, and they are not even aware of the lawmaking processes. They don't even understand like what exactly is happening. Even the impact of the lawmaking processes in their lives is something that especially young people from my community, from a rural community, they are not even aware of that. They are, you know, in some of the young people, they are busy, like in the informal sector. For me to really think that I'm going to live, to have a full day, that I'm not going to be attending to my work, you know, usually we live from hand to mouth, so that means, you know, I can't leave my job for me to attend like the public hearings. So a lot of people, a lot of young people, they do not attend, you know, the public hearings, the lawmaking process from my community, because of some of the factors that I've mentioned, especially the issue of lack of information, the lack of knowledge concerning the lawmaking process and the importance of it in our lives, in our day-to-day lives.
So definitely we are highlighting that we have issues from transport, we have issues like general access to this information, because nobody really knows what's going on. We will get back to you, but I just want to get a collective view from all of you. So I'll come to you, Dr. Hillary. What are some of these challenges? What are some of the experiences that they have been going through in these lawmaking processes?
Well, thank you very much, Monashe. I think in the work that I've been involved in, I do allude to what Margaret has said. Youth are exposed to what we'll call structural violence.
Okay.
And Margaret has captured it very well. Structural violence happens in the sense that they are systematically excluded. So there's the issue of location of the sites for the discussion, which is strategically done that not everyone in a rural area will be able to access, even those in towns. And also I think we don't need to shy away from this. The fact that this process happened during COVID lockdowns is in itself a form of structural violence, where people are then systematically excluded because you cannot get a letter to travel. And I think that then makes the whole process a fallacy. To say so, then at the end of the day, how is the voice of young marginalized people being heard? And as long as we have such structural exclusion happening, then there is no participation equally across all ages. And I think Margaret also pointed out the issue around the informality of our economy. That in itself is a big challenge that young people face up with. That also means that instead of addressing other civic duties, they are concerned with their day-to-day lives. So they are more concerned about earning the dollar than attending a meeting. So there's opportunity costing here. Someone would ask you, what do I gain if I go and attend a meeting and leave my stall here? That's $2 that's going to be lost. So there's that. I think as we go in, I'll try and unpack this further. There is someone who is pretty much benefiting on the marginalization of young people.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll go further with that one. Linda, you are in Gwanda. What are some of the challenges, some of the experiences that the young people are facing in this lawmaking process? Are they the same? Are they relatable to what Margaret and Hillary have just highlighted?
Yes, thank you so much for that. The experiences that young people in Gwanda have faced in relation to the lawmaking process are quite very bad. Margaret stated that the public hearing meetings, when they come to the provinces, it's only just one area. For example, in Matabeleland South, we've got 7 districts, but when the public hearing meetings for the constitutional amendment number 2 happened, it was only in Gwanda Town and Plumtree for getting the Bait Bridge, the Matopo, the Insiza. So these are part of the structural inclusion mechanisms that the doc was speaking about. This is a deliberate move to actually close the space for youth participation. And we're still, you know, when youth are called to come and participate at a public hearing meeting, already the lawmaking process is, you know, towards the end. Why not include young people from the onset of the process, the formulation process? So these are the challenges. You are meant to go attend a public hearing meeting, sort of like to rubber stamp what is already there, written by other people, excluding young people. So these are the challenges. We are meant to rubber stamp what we did not formulate. We are meant to rubber stamp what really we do not believe in. So these are the challenges that we are facing.
Thank you very much, Linda. Skanyisiwe, you are in Victoria Falls. So basically, from what the other guests have been highlighting is just that there's so many challenges being faced by young people in these other areas. And based on what we've been discussing, what would you propose, or what would you suggest to be a possible solution for us to be able to include everybody in these decision-making processes?
Right. From my standpoint, the unfortunate scenario in our country is that, and mostly in rural and peri-urban areas, is that civic education has not traditionally been taught in our schools from a tender age, or in primary schools, resulting in a non-existent culture of civic engagement amongst young people. That's presenting itself as apathy and disinterest in the matters relating to the promulgation of laws. So if that's something that can be actually done, so that people do understand that you can teach this from a young age, people can be involved from a younger age. And what Margaret and Hilary were also saying, that the general socioeconomic conditions have put issues of civic participation at the periphery of youth activities, much to the detriment of all youths and matters that have to do with the youth.
Thank you very much, Skanyisiwe. So, over the past couple of weeks, we have been discussing this constitution amendment, and we've had a couple of guests come in, people sharing their views. And one particular thing that keeps coming back is that although the youth constitute a great percentage of the population, but not so many of them are part of these decision-making processes. And like you've been highlighting, we have issues like we're living hand to mouth. So, someone will be like, okay, let me weigh my options. Should I go for these hearings, or should I keep at my stall? So, Hilary, my question is, how do we make them understand that in as much as it might be a bit of an inconvenience in what they are doing right now, but their input is very important and it can influence what tomorrow will be like? How do we get that to them? How do we put it across?
Well, I think, like Ska pointed out, there's the issue of an incompetent citizenry. And the citizenry is incompetent because, let's be honest, no one in Zimbabwe, as far as I recall, has been taught civics in school. You get to hear about civics and your civic duty. Should you take a sociology route, or should you take a study in law at university? But I think going back to basic, there's the issue of civic education. It's unfortunate that at the moment, the authorization of who does civic education in the community is held by one institution. Okay. The Zimbabwe Election Commission is the one that approves or authorizes NGOs that do civic education. And that in itself is a danger, because it does not open up space for people to understand their constitutional right and their expected duty. So I think one solution is, let us have a curricula that deliberately teaches civics education right from primary school. I think a good example is Zambia. Grade 7 people know a lot about civics. So that's one way. And the other issue is we need to deal with what I would call adultism and ephebiphobia. Ephebiphobia is basically the fear of youth, and our country suffers from that. We have adults in different spheres, both developmental and political, who are afraid of young people. And therefore, the space is closed out for them. Young people are relegated to student activism or youth leagues. They're not given an opportunity to lead. And should they be given an opportunity to lead, they're given the opportunity to lead in running battles and to fight for other political leaders. There's the general mantra that, no, their time shall come. But when is their time going to come? Okay. The space has to be open now.
Okay. Looking at civic education, obviously we are also trying to attain where we say every child should have access to basic education. So how then do we balance that? We're trying to make sure that even in the urban areas, everyone has basic education. And at the same time, we want to now introduce civic education. Do we have the resources? How do we balance that?
I don't think it's a matter of resources.
Okay.
in my opinion, it's a matter of political will. The gatekeepers within the education system, the decision makers, the policy makers, just need to have the political will. And the reason why this is like this, I think people capitalize on ignorance. As long as people don't know their civic duty, they're not going to be worried about it. As long as people don't know what is expected of them in terms of participating in all these processes, that's fine. And those who stand to gain are the ones in power and in control. The other challenge is we've politicized everything. And by politicizing everything, you know, if you were to ask around, a number of people did not attend these meetings because in courts, you are participating in politics.
Okay.
And until and unless we shift the mindset from that, where having community engagements, participating in lawmaking processes is not seen as participating in politics, we're still going to be stuck. And that goes to the issue around the issue of civic education. The resources are there. I think we've got civic society that's doing it. I mean, examples are the different NGOs that are part of this discussion. I don't think it's changing the whole system. It's just introducing an additional component to what is already being given as basic education.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll bring this back to you. Looking as we are talking about what could be the possible solution, but of course it might be a bit of a long-term solution of sorts. But at the moment, we are facing what's there right now. How do we deal with, you know, especially this aspect of divorcing the politics from what's there on the ground for them to just understand that this goes beyond politics? That's the first question. And secondly, as Rise and Shine Trust, with the experience you have with the young people, how receptive are they to these reforms when you're trying to go into communities and giving them this awareness?
All right, thank you. I think we say this all the time, that the youth are the future, and people understand that, but not really act upon it. So despite the bad socioeconomic situation, the lawmaking processes do not actually stop, and it is important for young people to make their contributions heard through various platforms and channels, bearing in mind that the Constitution and laws are the foundations for future prosperity and development. And sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
I was asking you about the work you do as Rise and Shine Trust. How do you go into communities to try and talk to the young people, and how receptive are they when trying to understand the concepts of the lawmaking processes?
All right. You'll find that when we do try to reach out to the young people, it's unfortunate that they might want to care, but the dire inequalities exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a despondency and a general belief that no matter how much the youth actually want to care, the feeling is that no one is listening across the aisle, and that those who might be listening are doing so with a nefarious agenda, making young people feel used or useless. But it's important for young people to care, because not only is it important to understand and contribute to legislative processes, but also because the numbers of the youth at 65% of the population means that most laws promulgated will affect them and their future children more than those that actually instigate the change of those laws and amendments thereof. So it is us, the young people, who have more to lose rather than the older generation whose years are yearning on earth, and yet ours are shining brighter. And it is surely in our best interest to participate fully in these national processes. So we try to preach that message as much as possible to the youth that we engage with in Victoria Falls. But because, as we mentioned before, because it's a rural setting and people have not been taught about civic education, it's quite difficult to actually share the message when you're trying to share a message where people don't have a basic understanding of what the message is about.
Thank you very much. I'll bring it to you, Margaret. From what Ska has said, you know, we're looking at how we can get the youth to understand the importance of this, but at the same time, you know, we still have these hindrances that we keep highlighting. But do you have enough, you know, organizations or trusts in MASH East, for example, that are going into communities? What's the experience from that point?
Okay, so for me, I think we might have organizations that might be interested, like in doing civic education to communities, but you know, there are a lot of hindrances. Like to really work in any rural community, it's not that easy, you know. And even the kind of, sometimes even the issues of civic education, these are just basic issues. Like even when you talk of constitutional issues, you know, I've got a friend of mine who works in Seke. Sometime at a time they went to do constitutional awareness, but even after the program, I mean, they were followed and say, what are you teaching the people? So you can even imagine, I mean, the kind of hindrances that people always face, like when they are working in communities. So it's not that easy. It's really not that easy. The situation is not conducive for community organizations to really work with people, because like Hilary mentioned before, it's like you are, I mean, everything is politicized. So even when you talk of constitution, it will be like you're talking politics. Even when you talk of civic education, it's like you are talking politics. Even when you just, you know, gather people, like to have a basic community meeting, it's like, what is your interest? I mean, probably the next elections you want to campaign. I mean, what is exactly your agenda? I mean, you do not have any agenda, any political agenda. You're just trying to empower the communities. But you try, you know, you're always faced with you know, with those challenges and, you know, and those hindrances. So it's not that easy. But I mean, there's a lot that still needs to be done, like in educating communities out there. But I mean, the situation is just not conducive.
Thank you, Margaret. Linda, you did mention that in Mat South you have about 7 districts, but it's only in Gwanda that you had these hearings. So as your organization, I mean, you do understand how this impacts the entire province, but how have you been, you know, going into the communities? We are trying to understand how we can bridge the gap at this current stage.
Thank you so much. As Community Youth Development Trust, we are working in all the 7 districts of Matabeleland South. So as part of the public hearings, what we managed to do as an organization was to have meetings prior to the public hearing. So in each and every district, we managed to come up with the position papers to that speak into the constitutional amendment number 2, and we managed to actually send to Parliament the position papers that were coming from the different districts. And one other thing that we actually managed to do was to actually write a petition, because we realized that the 10 seats that were proposed by the Parliament, and to actually give seats to young people is not enough. Youth constitute more than 62% of the population in Zimbabwe, and for us to only get 10 seats in Parliament, I think it's really not fair. So youths in Matabeleland South actually are now lobbying for 30%, at least 30% of the seats. So the petition is in Parliament, and we've been having engagements with the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Youth. So this is exactly what we've been trying to work around as Community Youth Development Trust. And youths in these areas, they are really aware of the situation that is happening in Zimbabwe. Youth participation should be a full package, not just limited to politics. They understand that youths need to be included and involved, be it in political, economic, and social processes. Because if we give one side, especially when we're talking about politics, that's where maybe I think we get it all wrong. Because spaces, when you talk about politics, you know, it's quite difficult to be given that space to actually raise awareness and to speak freely. So if we take youth participation as a full package, to say we want to be included, we want to be involved, then I think it will be much easier for us to actually also raise awareness or to do civic education in the districts.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. Hilary, I'll direct this one to you. From what Linda was talking about, you know, especially this aspect of lobbying for 30% in Parliament, and since this amendment, there have been a lot of people voicing their views. Others are saying the 10 seats, they're too little. Others are saying we shouldn't even be, you know, focusing on this quota, and others are saying we want more. In your opinion, given we didn't even have these 10 seats at all, is it a good start? And if we're saying we want more, would it be sufficient in terms of having young people in Parliament?
Well, I would say it's not a good start. Why do I say it's not a good start? Because this is tokenism, and tokenism is not meaningful participation. And I think we need to get to a point where the voice of young people is heard. I mean, we've had discussions saying that yes, young people constitute more than 60% of the population. So if you give 10 seats in Parliament, in a Parliament that has got about 200 plus members, that's less than 5%. So what are we saying? That is tokenism. So if we applaud tokenism and we say it's a good start, we set a bad precedent. I think what should happen is increase. I mean, the 30% is a fair demand to say, look, we're demanding 30% of the seats, but then what I would say is let them not be allocated to say, okay, these 10 seats are reserved for. I mean, like what is happening with the 10 seats in Parliament. We can then say, okay, we've got 70 seats. Young people are going to contest for those 70 seats. So the 70 are preserved for young candidates.
Okay.
Not that you just have 10 who are shortlisted from, but they also have to earn their seats. I mean that's equal participation, and by earning their seats, they need to then show that they are worthy of their right to sit at the table. Okay. We still need to do more and go beyond the tokenism. I mean, meaningful participation, meaningful youth participation, like Linda pointed out, there's need for a total package of empowerment. I think we could also touch on economic empowerment, because we cannot talk of participation in politics when we do not talk of the economic empowerment of young people.
I'll have to cut you off there. We will go back to that point. Margaret, in establishing these 10 seats and establishing that, you know, the youth have been giving this, like Hilary will say, tokenism. There's also the seats from the women's quota system as well. There's the other 10 extra seats. But then, of course, we are saying they're little. We are saying it's not going to reach each and every province when we're trying to establish that everyone gets access to these. But in your view, especially when we're dealing with the young girls and the community, of course, we are trying to get them into, you know, the modern world to understand that there's more to life than just, you know, being at home and whatnot. So do they also understand that they also have the power and the opportunity to be involved in decision-making and law-making processes, to even get to Parliament? Do they understand this?
Okay, so for me, from where I come from, I think young girls and young women, I think, you know, it's a patriarchal community. And women, like, they're just socialized to say men are the leaders. So, for example, I was having a meeting with some women, and they were saying, you know, I think one of you should contest, in the next election. And like they were saying, no, we still need our council. And why him? And they were like, because men are the leaders. I mean, we can't. Like, really, I was like, what? You know, so, you know, they just don't believe in themselves. They don't have the confidence. They don't have the know-how. They're just socialized to say, you know, men are the leaders. And you can also imagine, like, if I am to contest as a council, as a member of parliament, I have to consult my husband. And even the whole family will be involved. You know, that kind of thing. But for a man, it's just a decision that he has to make. The next election, I'm going to contest as a council, and no one will question, and no one will say anything. But for a woman, and also considering we come from some of the churches that say women cannot be leaders. It's just the men. Okay. So we are living in a community, especially from a rural community, where most women, they don't believe in the leadership of women. They can't even vote for another woman because they say women cannot be leaders. So I think there's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of educating the women, the young women, to say, you know what, you also have a space, even in terms of just attending the meetings. They say the father will represent us, my husband will represent me, but your husband doesn't go to the clinic to give birth. You are the one who's facing the maternal challenges that you face in the clinics. So you also need to speak for yourself. I mean, these are the challenges that we are facing in the community, and we need this and that, because you can imagine our duties as women, the household core that we face, the issues of water, the issues of health, the issues of children's education, and so forth. So these are some of the issues that we also have to speak for ourselves. But as some women, they will say, if the husband is going to attend the meeting, you attend on my behalf. So for women, the only thing that they know that they can do is to vote. I mean, I have to vote. Voting for a man who really deserves to be a leader, I can't. But one of the things that I've realized that women are very much aware of is the issue of registering to vote and voting. But to be leaders, to say your voice, it's just something else.
Thank you, Margaret. Sikanyisewe, I'll ask you, based on what Margaret has been talking about, we are trying to get the youth to be empowered, but when we are seeing that, especially in the rural communities, young women are still a bit backwards. We're trying to get them to understand that, it goes beyond just registering to vote, it goes beyond just voting. How do we then, tackle this at community level before we even want to bring it at the national level?
All right, thank you. At village level, there are so many activities that actually happen, and we strongly believe that young people, especially women, should begin to attending meetings and participating instead of negating meetings to only the older people, as Margaret was saying. Young people should be part of water committees, development committees, ward committees, campfire committees. There's so many school development committees, and any community really at community level. They should be well read and researched through understanding our law and lawmaking processes as well. And they should be willing to engage with multi-government institutions, from youth desks to women's desks, so that it's not just limited to just when you need to vote. That's when you start learning about civic engagement or what you need to do for your country. And then young people should be willing to interrogate those who seek to hold positions of leadership for them, who represent them. So such small acts at community level cause a ripple effect that can work for the development of the country and women in general.
Okay, thank you very much, Ska. We will take a short break and we'll be back so soon. Welcome back to the second segment of our Youth Empowerment and Transformation Trust discussion. Our topic is on Beyond Constitutional Amendment 2 Act, Youth Experiences in the Lawmaking Process. Remember, this broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers Television Network and our partners, Youth Empowerment and Transformation Trust, YET. It is important to note that Zimbabwe is a youthful country with approximately 67.7% of its 13 million total population under the age of 35. And in the previous segment, we were just trying to, understand the challenges and the experiences that young people have in decision-making processes and law-making processes, trying to understand if they understand their rights, if they understand what they're capable of, if they understand their potential. And in going forward, I'll start with you, Hilary. We are saying we want the youth to be more involved. We want the youth to be participating in lawmaking processes. It goes beyond just registering to vote and goes beyond just voting. But given the economic situation in the country right now, how then would you encourage a young person to be proactive in terms of their rights, in knowing the Constitution, in terms of being involved in deciding their fate? So, like you highlighted earlier, people are more focused on what am I going to eat today? Tomorrow, that's another story. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think for starters, we need to encourage or promote authentic youth empowerment.
Okay.
Not the what we've seen in a number of situations where leaders bring bags of maize meal, of rice. I think if we get to a point where young people would also self-organize and start promoting social cohesion in the community, I would advocate for social entrepreneurship, and maybe let me unpack it a little bit. I think in terms of social entrepreneurship, young people will also be promoting social cohesion and creating social value within their community. Now, this is at community level. I mean, if we remove the political veil, there's a lot that unites us as individuals or as members of a community than what divides us. If young people can get to the point where they identify those things and then they get to have things that they can do together as a community. I mean, we've had situations where we brought together young people to start an enterprise or a business that addresses one of the challenges that people face. It could be access to water. It could be the issue to do with excess waste or refuse collection, right? It could be the issue to do with the period poverty. If young people can congregate around those issues, as they earn a living, they use those platforms to also then start discussing civic issues. So the first and foremost is remove a price tag from young people. Okay. And that can only happen if there is authentic economic empowerment. I mean, offering young people free data is not empowerment, but I mean something that allows young people to make money on their own. And as long as there is a price tag, anyone can come into the community and buy young people for whatever cause that they have, and dissuade young people from participating because it's not of value to them. But as long as this exists, then we have a big challenge. Let us promote economic empowerment. So I think we need to go beyond the Constitution and promote economic empowerment. And also I think the issue around constitutionalism itself, is there freedom to participate, is there freedom of association. If it's not there, they're going to shy away. But I think the major one is give them an opportunity to earn a living, and coming to these platforms becomes easier.
Thank you, Hilary. Linda, I will bring my next question to you. Hilary has highlighted the importance of authentic economic empowerment. I like that point. He says authentic economic empowerment. And this is, when we're talking about how we want the youth to be capable of going into communities, to be capable of making a difference without having to worry about their next meal. But at the same time, I think it's also important to note that it's their participation now that is going to affect what the future might hold for them. So in your view, Linda, how then do we, what would you say is the first step towards authentic economic empowerment?
Thank you. I also like that, authentic. Okay, I just think that young people, you've got capacity to actually be involved. What is just needed is for organizations, the government, all institutions to strengthen these capacities so that young people can realize their potential. I think from everything that has been happening in the country, or even in my province in Matabeleland South, organizations have been getting in the communities, raising awareness on this and that. But then now, what is to a point that young people are now aware, they have the information. So now what is left is for them to actually realize their full potential so that they can take up these issues, and they can also have their own solutions, because the problem is someone giving the youth solutions when the youths themselves can actually when youths themselves have their own solutions. So yeah, I think we now need to actually strengthen capacities, train these youths. Yeah, especially in Matabeleland South, you realize that there's a lot of gold in our community. So now we need also policies that can actually include young people to also own these gold mines. We need policies that are youth-centric, such that youths can actually stand on their own, because once the youth stand on their own economically, definitely it will be easy for them to maneuver into the political spaces.
Okay, thank you. While you're on that point, you are talking about how we need more policies. We need youth to be involved, to have this, for lack of a better word, this power to to say we want ABC. But in your experience, could you say that the input and contribution of youths is regarded or strongly considered, especially when say a 24-year-old voices of youth to say, you know what, we want a certain policy? Do you think that they are being regarded or actually being listened to?
I think it's to a lesser extent. Maybe that's why we need to be to have more youths into parliament, because that is where the laws are made. That's where laws are formulated. So if we look at the stats now and we check how many youths, real youths are in parliament, you realize that they are very, very, very few. I doubt that there are maybe more than 5. So if we have young people in parliament, I am sure that we will have youth-centric policies, and it will actually pave a way for a 24-year-old in Madlambuzi speaking out and being heard, because someone in parliament who is of that age and who is of that nature understands what that youth is actually talking about. So I think it starts from a representation. If we've got more youths representing youths in parliament, I am sure the voices of other youths in different districts will be heard as well.
Thank you very much, Linda. Like I did mention earlier, we have been running this series for a couple of weeks now. And one interesting episode we had, we were, taking lessons from the women's quota system and applying how this youth quota system would affect performance of youth in parliament. And from what Linda has said, I just had to go back there. An important lesson we learned from the women's quota system was a lot of people not taking these women seriously, So we hear of stories of women being called Bakhosi in parliament, and we're saying we going in with these 10 seats as well as the other seats from the women's quota system. How then can we say, when we're empowering the youth, they have the confidence to go and say what they feel? We might have this provision, but we also have to demand, recognition. I'll start with you, Margaret.
Okay, I think that is very, very important, because I mean, the fact that someone's going to select you to represent a specific province, you know, being a PR in the parliament, that basically means, I mean, that person coming from political parties, and the political parties also have their agendas. So for me, I think there's really need for young people to really be empowered to look beyond the political, you know, parties, to look beyond ZANU-PF, MDC, and that I'm here for youth issues, and for youth issues, and I'm going to represent other young people who are out there. Even despite that you are at a position, also need to have an understanding of how youth in the rural communities, youth in the urban areas, youth who are in the education sector, youth who are unemployed, are being affected by various issues that are affecting young people. This party and from this party, you know, just dividing ourselves. So as they go there, as they are in the parliament, as they are representing young people, they need to speak with that one voice. They need to have that oneness, and they have to have also support from us young people as well, to say they are there and they're going to speak also for us, and we need to have that relationship to say voice. So for me, I think there's really that need to say is they are going there. It's not about, you know, it's
trying to divorce ourselves from the
group of people who are arrogant. Such leaders also then maybe alluding to young people as God skinners. So intergenerational dialogue or discussion, and if that does not happen in Parliament, and that's it. But also we need to go beyond just looking at Parliament. There are other spheres and other areas where young people should now, instead of waiting for them to be invited to the table, they either set up their own table or they bring their own chair to the table. Okay. Pushing for young people to be in the councils themselves, because this is where I believe a lot of transformation and on their own without waiting for others to come. I think what could destroy the potential of young people is a savior mentality, waiting for someone to come and do it for us. They're not.
Next question, you know, given what Hillary has said, you know, we're looking at, we might come across a couple of youths that are reluctant to say, you know what, you know, I'm not going to be part of this decision-making process. I'm not going to be part of this because I refuse to be called a goat skinner. I refuse to be, you know, undermined. So how would you address this, Ska? What would you then, you know, advise these young people?
Coaching. Like you find that some young people are susceptible to being coached to follow a certain path or road of thinking that might not reflect their own, be different from what is important for a young person in a city setting. So we also need to happen like an initiative or a program or a policy. Very important to get the youth voice in for whatever can input that actually change the country's narrative to takes. Or
Ska did mention the importance of coaching young artists, but of course, as a youth development expert, in your experience and your views, how effective is nurturing young people, young children at an early stage? And yeah, let's start there. How effective is this process?
Well, it is quite effective. I think I'll allude to the fact that if you look at what YET is doing, I think in their winter school, they are nurturing young leaders. We've seen vibrant young leaders coming out of my hand and say, look, in Community X where I stand, the door is open. Young people can come in and get support or mentorship. I think the culture of identifying a mentor is something that we need to also bring into to our young people, where people should not shy away from having identified someone, you approach them. I mean, mentorship does not have to be that you spend every day with that person. It could be.
On that note, I mean, we have a couple of organizations, we have a couple of institutions. You did give an example of the winter school that YET is doing, but of course, not everybody has the opportunity to go into these programs, to go into these institutions. So given that, you know, the whole point of this program is for us to give awareness, I'll open this to the floor. I'll start these structures that you would recommend to say, in MASH East, we have this organization, we have these days that we meet up in certain areas, so that more young, because I'm sure most people don't even know about these areas. So when we're trying to say you should be coached, you should be mentored, do they know where to go? Where should they go?
Okay, I think for me, I would like to say I think the government has to do more in terms of that.
Okay.
Like, for example, I think in Chikomba, where I come from, there's one center where they do. So I think there's really a lot that the government needs to do in terms of making spaces for young people to be mentored, for young people to be trained, for them to be able to identify their talents and to have those people that can also mentor them, that can also help them. And I also want to say, I think there's also a lot that the education in the community, because you'd realize that there can be a young person who is down there in the rural community who is very good at athletics. But for that person to come, I mean, to have visibility, to be known, to be able, it's very, very difficult. So I think there's a lot that the government needs to do. Even when you look at our recreational facilities, even in urban areas, I mean, there are now houses built there. There are no longer recreational facilities for young people to go to, even within themselves, to just have space for themselves. I mean, to be together, educating each other. There are no areas like that. And even given the issues of unemployment in Zimbabwe, a lot of young people, they are now engaging in drug abuse, and there are no facilities for young people to get help. There are no rehabilitation centers, even in rural communities. You can, for example, there's a granny out there, and the grandchild is involved in drug abuse. Where can she find the help for the grandchild? Probably she doesn't even have the money to travel to the city, and that she doesn't have the money for the facility. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and I think the government needs to work together with civic society organizations for us to be able to identify each other. I think for women, like really that we can then do to empower those women so that they can know that they will not go back to those abusive relationships. So we can just give them space for 2 weeks, and then what? They will go back to that abusive husband. So I think there isn't much, that is being done, I mean, to really, discover the talents, to mentor young people. And even the successful business people, they have to be there also for the next generation. The political figures that we're talking about, they also have to be there for the next generation. So to identify young people who are also interested in politics, they can also mentor them. Those who are in entrepreneurship, they also should be able to help the next generation that are coming.
Okay, we are running out of time. Or rather, MatSouth in general, do you have enough, institutions, do you have enough key structures and organizations that can assist young people in ensuring that they voice their views as well? I think we lost the connection with Linda there. We are running out of time, so I'll have to ask you, Ska, from Victoria Falls, do you have these kind of institutions? Do you have these organizations that can be useful in ensuring that young people get to have their voice heard, especially in terms of making them part of these lawmaking processes?
I do echo what Margaret was saying, that the government should and can do more to be able to educate the young people on what needs to be done, because you find that we don't have that. Rise and Shine Trust is one organization that actually works with young people. We try to educate them on civic part. Where I come from, the city is based on just tourism, so everything is just centered upon tourism and nothing more. And it's not conducive for a flourishing environment or economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Ska. Hilary, maybe just to close, if you could also, brief us with your experience with some of these organizations. I mean, we have talked about Mash East, we've talked about Victoria Falls, but what about the other provinces in Zimbabwe? Do we have these organizations?
Yes, I think we do. We have a number of organizations that are working or supporting young people. Yeah, so I think we've got civic society as well as people in sports who are also assisting young people. I think going forward we need to also then open up our virtual platforms and allow young people to connect with others. I for one, on a personal level, would be keen to mentor young people in academia, and I have an open platform where people can approach and we support each other. I think this is where the coaching should be happening, where people who are experts in their fields reach out to young people and open up their spaces. We should be able to to increase the participation.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I would like to thank my guests, Dr. Hilary Msarurwa, a youth development expert, Margaret Chogugudza, Director of Rural Young Women's Support Network,